The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.
Hello, this is Morgan Halgren. For 16 seasons, Living in Iowa told the tale of what it means to be uniquely Iowan. Tonight, we honor that spirit by bringing you another glimpse into our rich heritage with a few stories from our archives. In this episode of The Best of Living in Iowa, we talk with brave Iowa crewmen who flew in the B-29 Superfortress during World War II, explore the work of Native American poet and novelist Ray Youngbear, and we'll hear the compelling story of Janusz Bardach, who survived 5 years in Stalin's gulags. Many who have served in the armed forces have seen firsthand the price of democracy. Veterans of World War II have carried that awareness with them for nearly 60 years. In July of 2002, a select group of veterans gathered in Cedar Rapids to remember an airplane that symbolizes their priceless contribution to freedom. It was known as the Superfortress, and many believe it was the weapon that won the war in the Pacific. It was the B-29 bomber. Designed to carry large bomb loads long distances, it also had a pressurized cabin, allowing it to fly high over enemy defenses. Its own defenses were interconnected with primitive computers that allowed all 5 gun turrets to be aimed and fired from one location. And on August 6th of 1945, it was a B-29 named the Enola Gay that ended World War II.
The B-29, perhaps you know, is probably best known because it dropped the 2 atomic bombs. But we did probably a year of bombing before they carried the atomic bombs.
Merle Gary was stationed on Saipan during World War II. Saipan was one of the Marianas Islands, just within striking distance to Japan.
There were 3 Marianas Islands. Saipan was first to operate, and then Tinian, and then Guam. Even though the B-29 had the greatest bombing range of any bombers we had, it still was about to the limit of the distance we could fly. The other airplanes could not reach Japan from those islands. So that was one of the purposes of taking those Marianas Islands, get us within bombing reach of Japan.
Not only a lot of distance, but a lot of time has separated Merle from the war in the Pacific and the B-29 Superfortress. When World War II ended, Merle moved back home to Iowa. Nowadays, he volunteers at the Grout Museum in Waterloo, where he catalogs materials.
I haven't seen that plane for about 58 years, I guess. After I got off the airplane after a 16-hour flight to Japan, around midnight, I guess, I walked away from it and I never went back. And probably a month or 2 months later, I was on my way home. But I've never seen one since that time.
Built by Boeing, the B-29 was manufactured in 5 different factories. The last B-29 was built in 1946 on the 28th of May in a factory in Renton, Washington. And even though nearly 4,000 B-29s were built, only one is still capable of flight. It's named Fifi, and it's operated by the Commemorative Air Force. On July 29th of 2002, it touched down at the Cedar Rapids Airport, giving Merle and a group of B-29 veterans an opportunity to step back in time.
I was a bombardier navigator.
Harold Madsen was originally stationed with the 20th Air Force in India, but was later transferred to the Marianas Island of Tinian.
I flew 2 of the fire raids over Tokyo, and those nights, about 800 planes dropped fire bombs on Tokyo. The whole city was on fire. You could see flames for 100 miles or so.
They were tough. I mean, they burn up a lot of things in Japan. But we had to do it. They were the ones that started this thing, so we had to end it. And we did, in fine fashion.
Bob Lonergan was stationed on Saipan as a crew chief and flight engineer.
We trained together, we lived together, we prayed together, and brother, we hoped that we did a lot to win the war.
They're all in that mess together, and you're all dealing on the same thing, trying to win the war and go home.
As a personal equipment officer, Wendell Van Syke counted the planes as they returned from each mission and saw some so damaged that they crashed while landing.
There's 3 of us in a Jeep, and we saw this plane coming in, and he hit the end of the runway, and this was the result. So we started dragging some people that had been thrown out of the plane. We started dragging them away from the heat, and we kept dragging them away across the runway, dragging them away out of the heat, and I looked back, and this was horrible. There was one guy up there in that bombardier's part, just waving all around in there. The heat was coming on his tail. He just had to die right there.
Our plane was Hog Wild was the name of it. And it was wild, all right.
Eugene Harwood was a navigator. His job was to navigate his plane to the bomb site, where the bombardier would then take over. But it was on a mission to drop supplies on a prisoner of war camp that his plane was shot down, forcing him and 6 others to bail out.
We found out that the war was over on our way home, our way back to Guam and that was the longest mission we flew. It took us 17 hours.
Russell Cantine was a navigator stationed on Guam and was on the last bombing mission over Japan. Russell was also part of the armada of over 1,200 planes that flew over the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay as Japan signed the peace treaty ending World War II. Bob Niemeyer, historian for the Grout Museum District, is working to make sure we don't forget there is a price to pay for democracy. Bob has begun collecting oral histories from veterans of all wars, histories that will be part of the Grout Museum's collection in a new Sullivan Brothers Veterans Edition.
As a historian, it's not only an important, it's a critical resource. I mean, if we don't have these stories, all we have is a written word written by historians that oftentimes were second or third time removed from the story itself. So it is an important primary resource that we have to have. A second part of it is that if you didn't have all these folks, the war wouldn't have happened. The victory wouldn't have been won. D-Day wouldn't have happened. It's a great story.
Just as Tilly Woodward was able to inspire by accentuating the positive, our next artist, Ray Youngbear, makes his contribution by creating art that combines the best and most meaningful elements of his Meskwaki heritage. That requires that he pass the time living that heritage. Ray Youngbear and some of his relatives offer a glimpse into Native American culture through their songs, dances, and poetry. Youngbear is most noted around the country as a poet, but his artistic expression is wider than the poetic form. He's also a singer, an artist, and a novelist. On this pine ridge behind his home, Ray finds inspiration.
I tend to view myself as an individual, primarily, who happens to be a Native American living in the state of Iowa, who is also a Midwesterner and an American, and so my writing style is unique in a sense that I tend to utilize various aspects of nature. The very fact that my wife and I live on this hill is to me very, very important, and so I take various aspects of nature, mythology, pop culture, and then include in it some of my dreams and images, and so it's a compilation of a lot of images, and they're intertwined. The trick, of course, is to try to make them come out to mean something, and so sometimes they don't come out with one specific meaning, and so oftentimes critics and teachers are puzzled by my work. I am primarily my grandmother's messenger, and most of my work stems from her teaching. I like this spot very much, and one of the reasons why is there are several birds of prey that come here, 3 or 4 varieties, and so my wife and I are intrigued by them, my wife being from the eagle clan, and we oftentimes hear these various hawks as well as young eagles call to one another, and so we come up here and basically look at them, and the birds in return look down upon us, and they know that we are of no danger to them. They're very beautiful birds, and so we respect them for that. The fact that they make their nest back here is a sign that they trust us, and so we take great pride in that fact. One doesn't get to know me through one poem. You have to read a lot of my works before you can come up with some sort of an idea of where I'm going.
Currently, Ray is modifying where he's going as a writer. His latest work is an autobiographical sequel to his highly successful Black Eagle Child. Youngbear is leaving behind some of his surreal imagery in favor of a more conventional style.
It was the first anniversary of Uncle David's return from a war, Agamaheg, overseas. Through the wild, unabashed process of adolescence, the quiet, unmitigating presence of South Vietnam would slip past us. It was there, though, waiting to take shape. Strangely, the one tangible evidence David brought back was a 35mm Petrie band camera. Being the oldest nephew, it became a source of fascination. I sometimes borrowed it without permission. Since my younger brothers and sisters were ever present, they became instant subjects. This is where Todd came in as my assistant. Their childhood and where we lived could be spread out over the tablecloth like playing cards. Many nights were also spent under the giant oak tree with the camera's aperture held open to the sky, capturing the silhouettes of gnarly limbs and the silver rings around the moon. The Moon Ring series, however, did not impress the photography club teacher who imparted a lesson on bigotry, but I was undeterred. My parents, Leonard and Chloe Youngbear, had no trouble fueling my artistic interest with rolls and rolls of film.
And so, with the eventual publishing of this latest book, Ray Youngbear moves forward. But on occasion, he echoes the images, events, myths, and various cultures that have become his poetry and songs.
Last night, when the yellow moon of November broke through the last line of turbulent Midwestern clouds, a lone frog, the same one who probably announced a premature spring floods, attempted to sing. Veterans Day, and it was sore throat weather. In reality, the invisible musician, this frog, reminded me of my own doubt. The knowledge that my grandfathers were singers as well as composers, one of whom felt the simple utterance of a vowel made for the start of a melody, did not produce the necessary memory or feeling to make a Weda Sa Nagamun veteran song.
As an act of sharing and as a representation of the elemental fragments in Ray's own work, he invites members of the audience to join in the circle dance. The following story should help us put the difficulties of our daily lives into perspective. The journey of Janusz Bardach from Poland to Iowa via Siberian labor camps was truly a tortuous one, and his survival nothing short of a miracle. His optimistic nature helped him both endure the unspeakable horrors of the camps and then to go on to establish a career of helping others. This is the story of a man who was destined to live his life and become a healer, who cheated death many times, and who lived to tell the dramatic tale of surviving Stalin's dehumanizing labor camps in Siberia.
It's a story how millions of people were treated and perished. I was young, probably strong at that time, and I survived. I was just lucky. But most people didn't have this luck.
Luck and a strong will kept Janusz Bardach alive to tell his story in a book titled Man is Wolf to Man, Surviving the Gulag. During World War II, Janusz, a 20-year-old Polish Jew, escaped the Nazi invasion by fleeing to Russia, where he was forced to enlist in the Red Army. Even though Janusz hated the Nazis, he was still considered a foreigner and not to be trusted in the era of Joseph Stalin's paranoid reign of terror. Janusz was accused of treason and sentenced to death.
The pit I was ordered to dig had the precise dimensions of a coffin. The Soviet officer bound my wrists and ankles, told me to kneel, and pushed me into the dirt. These would be my last breaths, I thought. I waited for the shot, the bullet penetrating my brain. I didn't feel sorry for myself, only sorry that my loved ones would never find my grave. I waited, but there was no sound.
Janusz's life was spared, but what lay ahead felt like a death sentence. 5 years of hard labor in the Siberia of Siberia's Kolyma. A 6-month trek across Russia in crowded cattle cars and ships was only the beginning of his death-defying odyssey.
This was another case when I jumped out of the cattle car and I was caught and beaten badly. And the guy says, I would shoot you, but it's too much paperwork. So.
What does it do to you psychologically to be that close and then to escape so many times?
I really never thought about this, that I was so close. And it's hard to say that I never believed that it will be my last moment. It's my nature that I didn't let it come that close to me. Yeah. The horror of it or the danger of it, I kept it at a distance.
Mm-hmm. How many prisoners were sent to those camps?
Some people are saying there were 25 million Soviet citizens who were killed by Stalin. But what I can tell you, that in cattle car, you had to lay on the left side, and if somebody turned to the right, everybody has to turn to the right. And this was the same in the cells, and it was many times the same in the barracks. It was packed.
The guard opened a door and pushed me and 2 others inside. Hot, reeking air blasted in my face. The acrid smells of sweat and urine stung my eyes and nose. I felt pinned at the door by the insolent gazes of dozens of prisoners already crowded into the cell. I stayed near the latrine barrel where there was just enough space to lean against the door, the only spot where I wouldn't be pressing against the slimy, stinking flesh of other men.
I'm trying to stay alive. I will do everything. I will work hard. I'm hungry, I'm hungry. I'm cold. So everybody around is the same. But I'm not going to give up.
In the vast remote Kolyma region, where winter lasts 8 months, the slave laborers were forced to mine silver and gold in frozen earth. To get their meager daily food rations, they had to make their norm, meaning their quota. Not mining your norm brought a downward spiral of weakness, sickness, starvation, and death.
Conditions are so harsh. The loads of prisoners were coming in and in. So you live or die, nobody cares. Most people died from exhaustion and hunger.
I felt more and more hunger. The only way to fend off despair and depression was not to think. Thoughts crawled into my mind like serpents, but I learned to sever them with the thrust of a shovel or pickaxe. I broke time down into hours so that I only had to exercise my will for short periods. I forbade myself to think about the days ahead or about the length of my sentence. Fighting, quarreling, hunger, and thoughts of suicide broke prisoners down.
Even Janusz reached a breaking point, allowing himself to be provoked into a fight which landed him in the camp's black hole, the isolator. Tell the viewers what an isolator is and how, in a strange way, it was a turning point for you.
Prison within a prison. It's completely dark. It's filled a little bit with water, so you can't stand. And the bench you can sit on is a very short and very dirty and very slime. So it's horrible conditions. And then you are fed once a day, and you are given the water twice a day.
In this place, thoughts of suicide crept into Janusz Bardach's mind. But as you'll hear in another passage from Man is Wolf to Man, those desperate thoughts were replaced with determination for a different destiny.
On the 4th day in the isolator, a curious thing happened. I began to miss the mine, everything I had hated, even with the work, filth, violence, and senseless death. In the dark cell, hungry and shivering, I thought of all I had been through. Where was my fate taking me? I felt at peace. I would fight for my life. The isolator had brought me closer to the edge than I'd ever been before.
It's more mental struggle than physical to stay alive and to try to survive. It's much more mental.
One of the images that haunt Janusz is that of dead bodies being stripped of their clothing. The following passage explains this seemingly cruel behavior. Janusz and another prisoner had just survived a fiery truck crash.
Together, we removed the jackets from the corpses and tucked them around the survivors. We glanced at each other, thinking the same thing. He examined the jacket of one dead prisoner, removed it, and put it on over his own. We said nothing about the acquired clothing.
Staying alive was not completely a matter of luck for Janusz. He cleverly lied about his medical experience to secure a job at a prison hospital, a move that both saved him from certain death in the mines and foreshadowed his future career as a doctor. What were the things that brought you comfort under those terrible conditions?
When I had the feeling that I'm not living only for myself, but I also do something good for other people, I was very comforted.
With help from his brother, a colonel in the Polish army, Janusz was released from the camps and admitted to a Soviet medical school. It would be the beginning of a distinguished career of helping and healing others. As a plastic surgeon specializing in correcting facial deformities, now Dr. Bardach was invited to join the University of Iowa faculty in 1972 and became the chairman of the Division of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. The transition from slave laborer to world-class plastic surgeon is the topic of another book written by Janusz and co-author Kathleen Gleason. Their collaboration began with several textbooks on plastic surgery and continued with their co-authorship of Man is Wolf to Man. What did you think and feel as this story unfolded?
I was just stunned. because I would get so caught up in the drama of the events that I couldn't really even write. So he would tell me the story, and I was on the edge of my seat.
So he's inspired you?
He's inspired me very much, yes. He's just effervescent, his energy is endless, and his love of people is just endless.
All the more remarkable when you realize that after the war, Janusz had to face the reality of his family's demise at the hands of the Nazis. To protect surviving family members still in Poland, Janusz waited many years to begin writing his story. His daughter encouraged him to continue, and once he did, he simply could not stop.
And then I kept writing, because I thought that people need to know the truth about the Stalinism. There's so much written about the Nazism, and there is so little written about the Stalinism. And Stalinism, in my personal understanding, was not any better than Nazism.
Was this a cathartic experience to write this book?
No, I didn't do it to make myself feeling better. I felt very good before, so I felt basically very good all my life. I could adjust to very bad situations, and I could adjust to very good situations as well, because it's basically my character is quite optimistic.
The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.